everybody. Welcome to Care Connection, the free live webinar for family and professional caregivers of individuals living with Alzheimer's disease and related illnesses. This is Christy from the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Just a couple of things to go over. All participants will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. We will have time at the end for questions, and so you can type those in on the right-hand side of your screen in the questions box, and we will get to as many questions as we can at the end. Also, in the handout section, also on that right-hand control panel, you can download today's PowerPoint if you would like to follow along or keep it for yourselves. I want to introduce our guest speaker today. We've got Kendra Faro from the National Research and Training Center on Blindness and Low Vision at Mississippi State University. And so we're really excited to have her join us today to talk about this topic. So Kendra, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christy. So thank you for inviting me to do this webinar today. And I wanted to first just let everyone know that that I have been a direct service provider that went into people's homes and helped them once they lost vision to know how they can do things independently. And I did that for 14 years before I came here to this job. In addition, I myself am considered legally blind, and you'll know more about what that is once we go through a few of the slides here. And I will apologize ahead of time if I start coughing because I am also fighting a cold. So just bear with me as we get through the slides here today. Why am I not hearing this? Give me 1 second. I was hearing it talk. Why is it not talking? My computer needs to talk to me so I know what I'm doing. It's just totally not talking. If you hear my computer talking, just bear with me. I'm unplugging the headphones so I can see. Try to troubleshoot. Just not hearing anything. Would it be that when you mute the participants that somehow it doesn't allow the sound to come through, Christy?
I don't think it would make a difference for you since you're on here as an organizer, so I'm not sure.
I wouldn't think so. Catherine, can you see, is it going to a different screen when I'm doing that?
Yes, you're on a different PowerPoint right now.
Oh.
You want me to?
Hang on, let me just try and start JAWS again. Maybe it just crashed.
You're on Understanding Vision Impairment.
That's the right one. But I might not be in the presentation mode. But I'm not hearing the JAWS. It's just not talking to me. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is boot my other computer here and have Catherine move my slides for me. So I'm sorry, Christy. I thought it was talking, and all of a sudden it just stopped talking. So I have a problem. I'm running it from the flash drive there, but it's on the flash drive.
Okay, so.
And I need the PowerPoint. It's on there. Let me just see if I can do it without.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to see if I can do this without hearing it, which is going to be interesting. Okay, so I introduced myself. We can go to the second slide. I wanted to start also by just doing a disclaimer that my specialty is on blindness and low vision. My specialty is not on Alzheimer's, so I have done a little bit of research just to be able to speak to the topic today, but I'm sharing mostly just from the expertise of blindness and low vision. So the statistics, I just thought we could look at some statistics to talk to just look at from the beginning. So from the American Community Survey, we see that as age increases, the probability that someone has a vision loss also increases. And when you look at the older age group, so 65 to 74 is a little over 4%, and then once you go to 75 and older, it almost doubles from that. So it's 9, almost 10% of individuals have some kind of a vision impairment. You can go to the next slide. The American Community Survey is done as a self-report. So the question that people are responding to is, are you blind or do you have difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses? So that's where those numbers come from. Next slide. There are parts of the eye that all need to work together to have good vision. So if you think of the eye like a camera, you have your front cornea, which is the lens of the camera. That's the clear part in the very front of the eye. And as you go back, you have the pupil, which is the center dark part in the center of the colored part of the eye, which is called the iris. The pupil expands and contracts. It's the aperture of your camera. The next part of the eye is the lens, and the lens can actually change size. It's shaped kind of like an M&M, and it can get fatter or skinnier to help you adjust your vision to see either things close up or far away, and it changes shape so that it can adjust the focal distance. And the image that comes through the front of the eye is then projected onto the retina, which is the back part of the eye, the retina being actually part of the brain. It connects directly to your optic nerve, and the brain also plays a role in your being able to see. The main point I want to make here is just that every single part of the eye has to be working perfectly together to have good vision, which we would call 20/20 vision. Any part of the eye that has some kind of difficulty for one reason or another, or the brain even, that relates to the interpretation of the images, any of those parts that have a problem are going to influence how somebody sees and can cause a vision impairment or total blindness, depending on the problem. Go to the next slide. So I think of vision loss as a spectrum, with 20/20 vision, good vision, being on one end, and no light perception, total blindness, being on the other end of the spectrum. And 20/20 is a number that refers to a standard eye chart. And as you go across the spectrum, you come to 20/30, 20/40, up to 20/70. So in what the numbers mean, the top number is 20 feet is the distance between the person who's being tested and the eye chart. The second number represents what somebody with normal vision can see at that distance. So if you have 20/40 vision, you can see at 20 feet what somebody with 20/20 vision can see at 20 feet. You're at 20 feet, but they're at 40 feet, and they can see the same thing. You see it with the same clarity. See if I'm saying that correctly.
You are.
When you get to 20/70, this is the line where we start calling it low vision, although I want to say that all states and programs do not necessarily classify low vision to start at this point. So you just will have to check to see where the point where someone's eligible for services. But that's kind of a standard definition of low vision between 20/70 and 2200. Once somebody reaches 2200, which is just the big E that's by itself at the top of the eye chart, that's the level where someone is considered to be legally blind. So if someone with 2200 vision is looking at the eye chart, all they can see is that big E, but someone who has 20/20 vision could be at 200 feet and be able to see that big E as well. Once we move past that 2200 level, we're off the eye chart, off the standard measurement tool. So the eye doctor might hold up fingers and have the individual count. So we call that counts fingers, and they'll indicate at how many feet they could count fingers. And it's just an estimation. There's no specifics to it. They might also move their hand and say, can you see my hand moving? They'll call that hand movement, or HM. The level after that is called light perception. So just being able to tell whether the lights are on or off, which side of the room the window is on, for instance. And then the final level is no light perception, or total blindness. Go to the next slide. I have some example pictures here of what people with different types of common age-related eye conditions might have. So the one is diabetic retinopathy, and this causes scattered blind spots throughout the vision, in addition to probably an acuity, which is the sharpness at which you see vision, that your vision is. So it'd be clouded acuity plus the scattered blind spots. Age-related macular degeneration causes a blind spot to form right in the center of a person's vision. And the center part of your vision is much more precise and detailed than the peripheral part of your vision. So the blind spot is right on the spot where you want to move your eye to see somebody's face or to read, to see those details. But they can still see in the periphery, so they're going to catch movements and be able to you know, usually navigate around obstacles and stuff, but as soon as they want to look at somebody's face or read, they move their eye to that spot and they're covering it up with the blind spot. The final vision condition represented here is glaucoma, and it restricts the visual field from the side, and so the person might still see 20/20 vision in the center, but they don't see off to the side, and the functional difficulties with that are very different from the person with, for instance, macular degeneration. With glaucoma, the individual will probably have difficulty at night. They're going to need a lot of extra light. They're going to have difficulty seeing obstacles. They might bump into doorways or trip over things that are on the floor. Next slide. So this is just showing the standard eye chart here with the E on the top, or I don't know, does that one have a different letter?
No, it's E.
It's an E. And then there's a low vision eye chart that we sometimes use that can measure down to lower acuity levels beyond that big E, and that uses numbers, and it just measures in bigger increments. We'll go to the next slide. What is this?
Legal blindness.
Legal blindness. Okay. So there's two different ways that someone can be considered legally blind. And the two ways are through acuity. On the eye chart, if you can see 20/200 or less in the best eye with correction. So if someone has correctable vision to 20/20 in one eye, but uncorrectable vision in the other eye to 20/200, they're not legally blind. Only if their best eye is at 20/200 are they considered to be legally blind. And they are measuring this with correction, with standard prescription glasses or contact lenses. The second way that legal blindness is determined is through field of view. So if someone's field is restricted down to 20 degrees or less in their better eye, they are also considered legally blind. And this is very confusing, I think, to many people. You hear the term legally blind and you think that means, well, the person's blind, they can't see. But I hope that what I've described up to this point helps you understand that the person who is legally blind is likely still going to be able to see quite a lot. The definition is just kind of a standard to say that these people have reached a more significant level of vision loss. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is the definition for low vision.
Severe visual impairment.
Severe visual impairment, which is 20/70. And this, again, is with correction. And typically, a lot of driver's license, you know, you're going to go into a restricted driver's license, or if you're applying for a new driver's license, you probably won't be able to get one if you're at that 20/70 level. But again, state rules are different from state to state, so that's not an absolute thing that you're going to find everywhere.
Next.
Yep.
Visual abilities.
Visual what?
Abilities.
Visual abilities. These are the slides I'm going to have more problems with. So I'm just going to have my colleague Catherine read to me what's on these slides, and then I'll describe it a little bit.
So visual abilities, measurable organic functions including visual acuity, occipital lobe functions, color and light sensitivity, and visual fields.
So these are the different types of things that we measure in vision impairment. We can go to the next slide.
Low vision. Level of vision that's not improved by the use of standard correction and which hinders an individual in the visual planning and execution of tasks, but which can be enhanced by the use of optical and non-optical aids, environmental adaptations, and/or techniques.
So when we talk about functional vision, we're counting the vision, how somebody can function with the low vision aids and techniques, whether that's turning on more lights, whether that's using contrast, and we'll talk about examples of these as we continue on.
Functional vision and blindness is defined in reference to the overall use of residual vision, the level of vision available incorporating in the use of low vision aids, environmental adaptations, vision enhancement techniques, and visual ability. And it's important to point out that one size does not fit all.
Yeah, so that's the main thing I want you to take away, that there's so many different factors that play into the vision impairment that just because a magnifier works for one person does not mean it's going to work for the next person. There's different levels of magnification, different types of lighting that comes with the magnifiers, and also the task that you want to accomplish. So, you know, one person might want to be able to read a newspaper while another person might want to be able to read the recipes on the back of a cake mix or something. And those are different size fonts and different contrast of the words to the background color. And so all of those things play into that variability.
Factors of functional visions and visual abilities: acuity, visual fields, motility, brain function and processing, neurological considerations, and light and color reception.
So all these things play into it. Again, go ahead.
Environmental factors: color, contrast, as we've talked about before, time, space, and illumination.
So yeah, just more factors. Keep going.
Individual factors: cognition, sensory development, integration, perception, psychological makeup, physical makeup, fatigue, and experience.
So let me just talk about a couple of these. So like, for instance, experience plays into low vision in that if somebody has, when they had better vision, if they've seen an object, they're more likely to be able to recognize it with low vision than if they've never seen the object before, if they have no history of knowing what that object is. And let's see, we'll go on to the next one.
Okay. Other issues in functional vision are night blindness, depth perception, double vision, variability in functioning, cortical vision impairment, and blurring out.
So the cortical vision impairment is where there's brain involvement. So in that situation, the eye is completely functional. There's no problems with the actual front part of the eye, the lens, the parts that you see on the surface. But when you get to the brain just can't interpret what's being seen. And this happens as a result of a stroke sometimes. Or it can even happen in young children where they don't understand what they're actually seeing, and there are therapies to treat these children that don't appear from an optometrist or an ophthalmologist point of view to actually have a vision impairment, but functionally they just can't interpret the world around them.
Same thing about blurring out.
The blurring out comes mostly from fatigue or because of glare, and we'll talk a little bit more about glare in a minute.
Alzheimer's and vision. peripheral field loss, loss of contrast sensitivity, difficulty with depth perception, and eyes not working together, and then off balance and disoriented. And then there's a link at the bottom there.
Okay, so this one I want to spend some time on. So tell me again what the top thing is here. The
peripheral field loss.
Yeah, so I had to Google this and really do some research because I did not realize that there was a link between vision loss and Alzheimer's before just very recently when I've been studying this. That usually it impairs the peripheral vision, so it's like looking through a tube and they can't see off to the side. They'll often trip over things. And I was reading the link that's at the bottom of this page here earlier today, and they were talking about on there how it's hard for individuals to see movement, that they kind of get a still shot and then they move their head and they get really disoriented because they don't get that movement the way we might get it. And it could be because of the smaller field of view. I'm not sure why that is exactly happening, but it really makes sense to me if they're not seeing movement, why this would be particularly difficult to interpret what you're seeing if you don't see the movement and then you move your head. Because if you picture like looking through a tube and then you move your head and if you don't see the movement, all of a sudden you're just seeing a different like photograph, but because you can only see a little bit at one time to put together the whole picture, you don't really grasp the whole thing. So what's the next thing after that?
Loss of contrast sensitivity.
Okay, so a loss of contrast sensitivity. Contrast is the difference of color between the forefront, what you're looking at, like print, and the color of the paper, for instance, that the print is on. So when somebody sends you their family Christmas letter and they put it in black font on a red piece of paper, that's very poor contrast. It's very difficult to read that compared to if you put black print on a white piece of paper. So that's an example of contrast. And we can give some more examples later. Go ahead.
Difficulty with depth perception.
So depth perception, again, goes along with a smaller field of view, but also that the eyes aren't always communicating together, working together. And you see this a lot in that if there's like a difference between flooring, that you're going from carpet to a tile floor, for instance, that if they'll think that it's a step up or a step down, even though it's flat, that they can't tell. They can't tell that it's going to be flat there. Or they might see flowers on a tablecloth and try to pick up the flowers. They think that they're three-dimensional when they're actually flat. So things like that happen for individuals that have reduced depth perception.
And off balance and disoriented.
And of course, off balance, again, just because if you think there's a step and there's not a step, that's going to throw your balance off. And just being disoriented in general can come with Alzheimer's. So, but you can feel disoriented in space because you can't see to orient yourself to that space as well. Yes.
How to help. So how to help. These are ways to help. Use contrast, simplify.
Let's just stop with each one.
Okay.
So to use contrast, we talked about this a little bit before, to just enhance the background color to be more different from the item that you're trying to see. So if the person's eating mashed potatoes, you might put them on a dark colored plate and set the dark colored plate on a white placemat or a white tablecloth. So you can see clearly where the edges of the plate are, and then the food on the plate is going to be stand out against the color of the plate. Another place where contrast might be really important is in the bathroom, because the toilet is all white and the tiles can be white and the wall can be white, and if everything is white, it can just all blur together and you can't see any definition. So finding ways to add some contrast. I think if you could find a toilet seat cover that is dark to put on the light toilet, that it would stand out then, that you would see, that you would be able to see a little bit more where it is, or to put a dark colored floor mat around the edge of the toilet to help make that stand out a little bit where the toilet is. Or you could paint the wall behind the toilet a different color that's darker so that it would stand out.
Simplifies visual stimuli.
Yeah, so anything that's cluttered or crowded together, that's much more difficult to see and interpret what you're seeing. So simply removing clutter from a tabletop if you're doing a task or a counter, just, not adding a lot of busyness to things that are in print, if it can just be the print and not extra graphics around the side, or things like that will help them to be able to interpret that visual thing that you're trying to see better.
Reduce glare, shiny surfaces, /shiny surfaces.
Yeah, so a lot of times someone might interpret a shiny floor as being wet, and they might not want to step on it because they're afraid that they would fall if they step on it. So, being able to cover that up with a carpet, or being able to just reduce the glare that comes off of it, maybe closing the window blinds so that you're not getting a lot of reflection off of it. It might not look quite so bad. Shiny surfaces, mirrors, are sometimes very difficult to deal with for individuals, because when they look in the mirror and see themselves, they think somebody is in the room with them, like the bathroom, and then they don't want to use the toilet because they think that there's somebody in the room with them, and it's really just themselves. So sometimes even just covering up a mirror or a shiny surface is going to be your best option to help them to not feel anxious about seeing that reflection or that shiny surface.
And consult with vision rehabilitation professionals.
Yeah. So signing the individual up for services, if they're still fairly high functioning, they probably could benefit from learning to use some low vision aids and going through some training. And if they're lower functioning, you might just want to sign them up and have a consult, where they come in and you have a discussion about, the types of behaviors and things that are problematic, and try to brainstorm some ways that you can adjust the visual stimuli to make things easier.
Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a quote from Christian Roman that Kendra thought was important. Contrast is our friend, glare is our enemy.
So that's just something that we say in the blindness field all the time, that we try to reduce glare as much as possible.
Okay, next. The white cane mobility aid, it detects obstacles on the ground, and it also identifies a person as blind. And the white cane law can be found at that website that's listed.
So I wanted to just talk about some of the standard aids that might be incorporated in the services for people who are blind or have low vision. And a white cane is a mobility aid, and if someone has a reduced field of vision, this is really helpful because it helps to detect the drop-offs in front of your feet. If there's an obstacle that you need to pick your feet up and step over, it's going to detect that. It's also going to help identify you as someone with a visual impairment, so that when you're trying to cross a street or you're in a store looking for an item, people are going to be much more willing to step forward and assist you in that process because they recognize that you have a vision impairment. And every state has a white cane law, so the link there would take you to where they're all listed. The next slide simply has the Mississippi white cane law, just because I live in Mississippi. I have that one there as an example. We don't have to read it.
Okay. And Human Guide.
And so Human Guide is another type of way to adapt mobility, to move around safely in the environment, especially in environments where the individual is not as familiar. And the individual with the vision impairment is going to hold on to the guide's arm right above the elbow with the 4 fingers on the inside toward the guide's body and the thumb on the outside. And the individual being guided is going to walk about half a step behind the guide. The guide's going to give them information, like we're going to go through a doorway and the door is opening out on our right. And the reason you would give information like that is so that the individual being guided can put their hand out and help hold the door as you go through. Also, if you approach steps or an escalator, you want to say there's steps going up or there's steps going down, because, just to say there's steps, if it doesn't help you to be prepared unless you know which direction they're going. So those are just a few things. And once somebody is signed up for services, this is a typical service that they would receive, is instruction on how to use Human Guide.
Next.
Yes.
Video magnifiers.
So this is another tool that would help somebody with limited vision, and it's an electronic magnifier. We sometimes call it a CCTV. It has a camera under the monitor, and it takes a picture. Well, it's not like literally taking a picture. It's a live picture of print, and then it's projected onto the screen, and you can zoom in and zoom out with the camera to make the image larger or smaller. As you zoom in and make it larger, the less is going to fit on that screen at one time. So that's the drawback to it. If too much magnification needs to be used, it's not always the best option. But it also helps in contrast, to add contrast, because you can control whether the print, no matter what the print is that the camera is taking a picture of, you can manipulate it so that you can change the print to be like white on a black background, or yellow on a black background, or some other color on a white background. You have a lot of options to work with, and so whatever color combination works best for that person's vision, they can adjust it so they can read the print.
Professional team members would be a low vision clinician.
And let's just stop. I'll explain each one. So here's some of the professionals you might meet. The low vision clinician is usually an optometrist that has specialized knowledge in low vision, and the evaluation they do is not like a standard eye exam. It's going to last between like 30 minutes and up to as much as 2 hours. The eyes aren't dilated when they do this exam, and they're basically measuring what vision the person still has, and then they're going to show all different types of magnification aids, glare shields, which are basically sunglasses in different colors and different tint levels to get it, just to maximize the amount of low vision the person has. The next one is a low vision therapist, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this professional helps individuals who have low vision to learn to use the low vision aids. They do extra training with that. What's the next one?
Vision rehabilitation therapist or rehab teacher.
Yeah, so a vision rehabilitation therapist, this is actually what certification I have. And they teach a variety of things, including activities of daily living, how to care for yourself in your home, some low vision things, some assistive technology things, how to use devices like a talking clock, how to pour liquids, just a whole variety of things that people might do around their home, whether it involves a phone, a smartphone, a computer, a little bit of everything.
Next one.
Yes.
More professional team members would be, number 1, orientation and mobility specialist.
So the orientation mobility, we call that O&M in the field, and they teach the safe travel skills. So if someone needs to learn to use a white cane, the orientation mobility specialist would be the person who would instruct them on how to make the best use of that device to be safe with it.
The second is assistive technology trainer.
So the assistive technology trainer can go into a lot more depth and detail with computers and smartphones. if there's extensive, detailed things that need to be done there, they can definitely instruct in all those areas.
And the last on this slide is an occupational therapist.
So occupational therapists work with individuals with all different types of disabilities, and they have a broad knowledge of just all disability. Some of them have gone to specialized training where they know something specific about vision impairment, and others have not. So sometimes the occupational therapist will be able to provide a lot of the same things you might have gotten from some of these other team members, and in other cases, they're not really going to know anything at all about it. So it's really hit or miss.
Okay. And then the next slide is adapting physical activity. Can we read these?
Yeah, just
fall prevention programs, orientation and mobility training, and adapt exercise routine to meet needs.
So I think it's really important for people with Alzheimer's that they keep themselves moving, and that they don't just sit still and say, well, it's scary to walk across this room, so I have reduced vision, and so I'm not going to move. You want to find ways to keep them moving and interacting with the world around them. There are fall prevention programs, and there's ways to adapt them. Again, interfacing with some professionals in the blindness and low vision field would help to figure out what those adaptations are to make sure they could participate in a fall prevention program if you wanted to do that. There are plenty of activities and ways to adapt different sports and activities, which I didn't put up here, but if you just Google blind and a sport, you can find almost anything online of how to adapt running, swimming, golfing, just anything you can imagine. There are ways to adapt for someone who has limited vision.
Next slide. And then adapting other activities. The first is reading and talking books.
Okay, so one of the programs that you would probably have the option to sign up for when you are working with professionals in the field is the Talking Book program, and you don't have to go through them to get this program, but it's a free program from the Library of Congress, and they provide a very simple player it has high contrast buttons that are very simplified, simply like an up and a down arrow that are yellow on a black player for your volume. There's a big square green button that plays. It starts the playing as a book and stops the playing as a book. There's a red smaller button that has a different shape that is to turn the player on and off, your power button. And then it simply has some advance and rewind type features that you can just press them to go forward and backwards in your book if you want to scroll forward or backwards. And the whole book itself comes on a cartridge that just slides into the front of the player. There's no doors to open or anything. And it's all proprietary because of copyright laws. The books are provided in a specialized format so that not just anybody can pick it up and read it. So it's basically a flash drive, but it's in a specialized format that just simply slides into the opening on the front of the player, and then pressing the play button will start the playing of the book. And anytime you want to stop it and then restart it, it just remembers where you are. It will restart at the same place that you stopped. So it's very simple to use. And it's just a great activity for somebody that has limited vision so that they can still enjoy reading.
The second is craft, simplify craft.
So there's all kinds of ways with crafts to increase the contrast, increase lighting to the area where you want to work on the craft. And again, the professionals could help you with the specific thing that you wanted to try to adapt.
And the last is social activities.
So in social activities, it's really good for the people who are participating to, for instance, announce themselves when they come into the room, or if it's some kind of a group, to go around and have everybody introduce themselves. Just because you're sitting at the table and you can see some doesn't mean you know who else is in the room. So by going around, they know who's there. And I think also if they have Alzheimer's and they're afraid to ask, who are these people? I kind of forgot their names. It's just a standard thing that we do in the field of blindness and low vision, that we're always just going to announce our names, who we are. And even as we're talking, sometimes we announce our names, this is Kendra speaking, and this is what I have to say in the conversation.
Okay, next slide. The National Research and Training Center on Blindness and Low Vision.
So this is just our contact information, I think. So
it's a little bit about us.
Yeah.
Okay, you want me to keep going?
I think that's the last slide, unless there's one more.
Well, this one is the next to last, and it just tells that we conducted research about employment for persons who are blind or have low vision since 1981, that were grant funded, and National Institute on Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research and Rehabilitation Services Administration. And then the last slide is all of your contact information, as well as the Institute.
So the one thing I didn't really talk about is how to connect with services. So I want to talk about that just briefly, and then we can go to any questions. There is a website. Did it have the OIB TAC website on that previous slide?
It does not.
It does not. Okay. So there's a website that is OIB as in boy -TAC.org. And that website, if you go there, there's a link there that says state and territory programs, and that opens a list of all of the programs throughout the country for each state and territory. There is what we call an older blind program, including stuff for people with low vision, and they're just called older blind services. And if you call the individual or email the individual on that list, they would be able to connect you, get you referred to the right place. There's also, if you just Google, you might be able to find some low vision services in your area. We had talked about the occupational therapists sometimes provide some of these services. So if you Google just low vision services in your area, you might find an occupational therapist who does specialize in low vision and has some specialized knowledge, and that can be billed then through the insurance if it's through an occupational therapist. Through the traditional rehab services for blindness and low vision, those usually carry no charge. Sometimes the items, if someone needs a talking clock or watch or one of a magnifier or something, sometimes the item costs money, but not necessarily the service for people to come to the house. Usually those services are completely free. There are also nonprofit agencies, so depending where you live, there may be a nonprofit agency that also does services, and usually those are also at no charge. So, Christy, do we have questions?
Yes, thank you so much for that presentation. We've got a couple questions already. If anybody else has some, you can go ahead and type them in on the control panel on your screen. So our first question is there a way to test vision of someone who is unable to interpret and report what they see?
Can you read it one more time?
Is there a way to test vision of someone who is unable to interpret and report what they see?
Yes, you could do it. It won't be as precise, but you can test it through their functional vision. So simply presenting things to them, for instance, in different fields of vision, and like asking them to do a functional task if they can respond to that, but simply seeing, like putting things off to their side and see if they see them on a high contrast surface. You could put something there but to their side, and then you could see, like, keep moving it until they respond to the stimulus, and in that way you would know, about how small their field of view is, where things need to be for them to be able to see it. You'd want to pick something that they're going to respond to. If they like a certain kind of food or something, you just want to make sure it's on a high contrast surface and then present it in different fields of view to see where they're going to respond to it. You can't really test the acuity so much because they probably might not even remember like letters and numbers to be able to read. So the actual acuity is probably not as important. That's more important if we're talking about reading activities, although it plays into how they can function and what details they can see. So that would be my suggestion. And individuals who are in the field of blindness or low vision might be able to help you to think about how to observe, because there are, you might even search how to test preschoolers, screen preschoolers for vision impairments. For instance, the Perkins School for the Blind has a lot of things about working with young children, and sometimes they're nonverbal. So, the strategies you would use to test their functional vision would be very similar to how you would test somebody who is an adult that can't respond to tell you.
Great, thanks. The next question is peripheral field loss similar to the glaucoma view where the edges are dark or blurred?
Yes, it is similar to that. It's exactly like that.
Okay, great. The next question is, how or where does a person get the certification that you have?
Oh, okay. So, can you go back to the other slide, Catherine? Is our NRTC website on there?
The blind.Mississippi State, and then NTAC is.
NTAC, okay. So yeah, if you go to the NTAC website here, and then under resources, there's a link that says careers. I'm trying to remember what it is. Careers in the field, non-medical field of blindness and low vision or something. There's information there, but there's also university programs, and I can't think exactly where it is, but it's one of those things under the resources there. We have a list of university programs that help somebody to get the information to become certified. You might also check, there's a website, AC as in Charlie, V as in Victor, R, E as in egg, P as in Paul, .org, acvrep.org. And that's the professional organization that provides certification. So they have information there about becoming certified. And I don't know if they have a list of university programs there, but I think you might be able to find some information there as well.
Great. Someone also asked that they said that they're a certified occupational therapist assistant and want to get certified in vision and visual impairment. So would that be the same information for them?
It would be, although there is a special certification in low vision, SCLV initials that would go behind an occupational therapist name if you go through AOTA to do it. And you could look on the AOTA website for the, what's required to get the SCLV certification. Since the individual asking says she's an assistant, I would say going through the low vision therapy certification at ACVREP would probably be her best option.
Great.
Because I don't think the SCLV certification is that you can get it if you're an assistant. I think that's just for occupational therapists.
Okay.
But there are a few programs that are specific to occupational therapists to get the other certification.
Great. So the next question is, can you explain what visual acuity is in better detail?
So visual acuity is the sharpness at which somebody sees. And when we talked about the eye chart and the visual spectrum starting at 20/20 and going across to like 2200, that's measuring the visual acuity, the sharpness that you can see. they're I'm trying to think of a different way to explain it than how I explained it before. So, for instance, if somebody sees 20/70 on the eye chart, they're sitting at the 20-foot mark to see the eye chart, and that's the best they can see it. And the person that has 20/20 vision could stand 70 feet away and see the same level of detail that the individual with 20/70 vision could see at 20 feet.
Great. Okay. Somebody asked about a website that you mentioned. They wanted to make sure they wrote it down correctly, and they wrote down oib-tap.org. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, and another question. I have noticed when people with Alzheimer's get lost, the color in their iris changes. It happens with, sorry, that part's not clear. So it's basically asking about if the color in the iris can change with people with Alzheimer's and why that is.
I have not read anything about that, but I did read when I was just Googling to learn more about vision impairment and Alzheimer's that they're trying to find a way to diagnose Alzheimer's in an earlier stage through an eye exam. And they think that there's a certain change in the retina that someone who does a dilated eye exam should be able to see and make a diagnosis earlier in the disease process. So I know they're working on that from what I read, but it's not a thing yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's coming.
That's interesting.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions? You can type them in. We've got a couple minutes left.
So I could
Go
give
ahead.
some more examples about contrast, how to use contrast if you want to.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So another one is like a clear glass of water is like, it doesn't provide any contrast. So using a colored glass to put a drink in is going to really help it stand out. Using a contrasting color of a placemat behind the plate when you're eating. I'm trying to think. Some of the other ones, I was reading some online that were really good. They're basically on the website that I had on the Alzheimer's and vision loss page. If you want to, it's actually Vision Aware. If you Google Alzheimer's and with a capital A-N-D, vision loss, you'll see Vision Aware is one of the first things that pops up, and they have a really nice description about the visual changes, and then there's a link at the end of that I clicked on that went to another page on their website that talks about, for caregivers, things to do. So it talked about, the use of contrast and the mirrors and shiny surfaces and, a lot of those types of things that I gave some examples of today.
Great. Okay. I think we can go ahead and wrap up for today. So, Kendra, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. It was really great to have you join us today. I also want to thank everybody who had participated in today's call. I want to welcome you all back next month on February 13th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to be discussing financial fraud that day. And Kendra, just so you know, we have a couple people saying how they really enjoyed today's webinar and really learned a lot. And also, if anybody is curious, the PowerPoint is also available in the handouts section on the right side of the control panel. You should be able to just download it from there. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today for Care Connection, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.